It's an evil world we live in, man. I'm gonna try to condense this video as much as I possibly can, but basically, Meg Thee Stallion's in prison. At least that's what she would have you believe after the whole Free the Stallion tweets that went trending on Twitter the other day. But the more and more I look at the situation, the more and more I can't help but feel sad for her position, but at the same time, really enforce the idea and the necessity of how responsible artists must be going into the future, because situations like this keep occurring. Long story short, in early 2018, Meg Thee Stallion and her mother signed her to 1501, which is a record label that is owned by some former baseball player. Man's name is Carl, I think. Carl is a terrible name. Don't expect anything more from Carl. Parents really gotta hate you to name you Carl. Meg Thee Stallion pretty much had no issues with her label, 1501, from 2018 early on. Later on in that year, signed with 300 Entertainment, which is a move I'm sure 1501 had to approve because she wanted some type of visibility. She wanted more exposure. Nothing wrong with that, and if the label that you've already signed with is okay with that, then everybody's cool and copacetic. Fast forward to sometime in 2019, Meg gets new management, which means new representation, meaning she now has access to lawyers and people that can read over contracts that she probably didn't read over when she was 20 or so. Meg Thee Stallion and I are about around the same age, though she is about a year older than me. At the time of her signing, she would have been 23, maybe 22. Though she could have signed a little bit earlier, and they waited a little while to announce that she had been signed with 1501. I'm not 100% sure. Her management team over at Roc Nation then drops a little seed in her ear and tells her, hey, there's this thing in your contract that we don't know is to your benefit. You might want to talk about it with them. She goes back to her label 1501, talks about it, and they lock her down from what she says. Now, as a person who hates the idea of claustrophobia, I know what it feels like to be tied down, constrained, chained. It's an awful feeling, especially if you're an artist that wants to put out material just because you want to have fun, just because you want to make your money. I don't think a lot of people understand how these artists are really just glorified employees that go and talk to their label before they do certain things, needing their labels to sign off on music, needing their labels to approve when they want to drop albums. All that being said, you still have to acknowledge that Meg Thee Stallion received some type of benefit in signing with 1501 to begin with. Whether she viewed that benefit in the terms of a bag that she received early on, or maybe some type of distribution deal that she may have had with 1501 that gave her access to putting her music on platforms that she might not have been able to do so herself. Whether it was a production deal, whatever the case may be, she found some necessity or some value in signing with a label. And the label being independent does not make Meg Thee Stallion an independent artist. If you're signed to any label, you're no longer independent. It just means that they're not a subsidiary of another bigger company, and they do pretty much everything that they do by themselves on their own. Now, the bag she might have received might have been $250,000 or less. I mean, it's an independent label. But to an artist that's just breaking into the game, that doesn't really know that much, I'm sure that's a lot of money. And it's a good foundation to start off of if you want to build a solid music career, especially if you already do so much yourself. So Meg Thee Stallion uses her Instagram Live as a stage to express her grievances with her label right now. And like I said, I feel bad for her in the sense that if I were an employee going to my employer asking for a change in my hours, more vacation time, and maybe a slightly different rate of pay, and instead of giving me or negotiating any of those deals, what they do instead is lock me inside and don't let me leave, I would be really pissed off. Now, she is very vague when she says the word negotiate. I don't know if negotiate means I want to go from this amount of money to this amount of money. I don't know if negotiate means I want to leave wholeheartedly and completely. Labels are not looking to solely help these artists out. They are looking at these artists as Pokemon cards, or they're looking at these artists as chess pieces. You're an investment. You're not a person. And when Meg says that she was 20 or so years old, even though I believe she may have been a few years older when she wasn't looking at her contract, labels' success rely on the ignorance of the artist. So if there's something in there that they think you might not like, they're not going to tell you. They're not going to make you privy to that. They're just going to tell you, sign here, take your money. We'll worry about the rest of the details later. Like I said, it's an evil world we live in, okay? But you can't play by the world's rules. You gotta, wisen up yourself and be prepared for when these rules come at you. I did appreciate how Meg was trying to put people up on game by saying that you should get a lawyer and that you shouldn't take the label's lawyer, because obviously that's a conflict of interest. They're going to be looking for the benefit of the label more than they're looking for the benefit of the artist. But when I look at what she was saying, even that explanation was a little bit too vague, because a lot of people think that you need to have the funds and the availability to have a lawyer on standby, and that's not always the case either. And this will require artists to become more inquisitive. Being inquisitive will save you so much time, money, and agony in the future, because you'll be privy to so much more information. I'm sure people are rallying behind Meg right now and saying, hey, yeah, she's in a terrible deal right now, or whatever the case may be, but I'm not sure that they're telling people at the same time, hey, to avoid this happening to you, let me link you to a bunch of places and a bunch of articles that let you know that there are lawyers that will legitimately tell you and consult with you for free until you get your deal. If they know that they're working with a multi-million-dollar contract, which is what I'm not saying that Meg had at the time, they will look over your deal and take their percentages and their money after you receive your money. We as people and artists specifically just need to develop more foresight and use our common sense. In what world would it honestly make sense for you to bring me, a 20-something-year-old, in here knowing that I don't understand the verbiage that is probably in this contract? At that point, I would be aware of the fact that you have some type of knowledge in this field that I do not. You have an advantage, and I don't like that. So let me bring someone else on board so I also have an advantage, so I can also defend and protect myself. And before I even get into signing the contract, let's negotiate what's in the contract before I sign. I think almost every state in the US gives you access to free legal consultation in whatever situation is necessary. In a lot of cases, they're called working pro bono, or pretty much in simpler terms, they work without accepting payment and they work free of charge for like the public good or public use. Some specifically that deal specifically with contractual agreements. And I say these things not to demean people like Meg Thee Stallion or anyone else who may have found themselves in her position, but only to enforce how aware the people that are going to be in these positions need to be so that they aren't taken advantage of in the future and we have another story like this. One of the stories that's always kind of perturbed me the most when it comes to the music industry is how Prince did a six album deal, I believe, with Warner Bros. At the time for $100 million. And I don't think Prince realized at the time, and he even made everybody else aware of this, that his catalog was worth way more than $100 million, but that's what they wanted. They saw the value in the product. Keep in mind, at the time of his signing, Prince did have studios that were worth up to $10 million that he needed to keep paying for, and I believe his label at the time took advantage of that fact. Also, keep in mind, the success that Prince had in the 1980s was an anomaly that I believe his label knew he couldn't recreate the following decade, which is why they kind of pigeonholed him into that agreement. If he couldn't recoup the money, he'd always be at their beck and call. They'd own his masters, they'd own his catalog, they'd have access to everything that he'd built before that point. Would you rather have access to Prince's entire catalog, or would you rather have $100 million? At the time of Prince's signing, Prince was already making most of the music by himself. And I'm not saying that's what's going on here with Meg, but I'm saying this is what becomes of not reading contracts and not being more inquisitive in the moment and less excited about the monetary gain. You have to think, if some label is looking at you and offering you a substantial amount of money, you got to look at and think about how valuable your brand is ultimately going to be. You're going to offer me a $10 million deal, and I'm just some kid out of nowhere. Even if somebody was offering me $500,000, $250,000, $100,000, I am of some type of value to a bunch of people if you're willing to allow me this amount of money. So they're dealing with these things on different scales. Lil Pump comes out on social media every couple weeks to tell us how he's done making music. My nigga, no you're not. You got 3-4 more albums to go at least. And while I feel bad for Meg and think that this is still kind of blatant slavery, I don't agree with the label's evils just because Meg should have done more reading. I do have to acknowledge that we need to stop being impressed by numbers and have the foresight to understand our value in the future so that we're not owned by labels, so that other people can't tell you what to do. As much as Meg got on her live and told y'all how much she does herself, the fact that she's still signed to a label means that you didn't have the foresight that you have now. And that requires you to have an extreme belief and confidence in yourself before you're ever even brought into the same conversation of a major or an indie label. This will require artists to have a much higher respect for their craft. Because what did Prince end up doing before he passed away? He started scaring regular folk that were just simply using his content in random ways. He started scaring the shit out of people with $1 million lawsuits, eventually dropping them, but scaring them to the extent to let them know, this is my brand, and I value myself, and I'm going to be marketed and used the way I see fit. If you don't like it, then hand me my money. And lastly, this speaks to this very odd association that people have that links a lack of intelligence to poverty. On the flip side, they also have a strange link of knowledge to a college education. And what is Meg Thee Stallion at the end of the day? Meg Thee Stallion is a college-educated woman that unfortunately didn't have the wherewithal to read her own contract. So this link that people have with extreme intelligence and a college education should not be there. I'm not calling Meg dumb. I'm just saying that a common thing that I see in today's society is how underprivileged and how ultimately what they're trying to say is dumb people are. I'm telling you now, it doesn't take a college education to be inquisitive. If you really care about me, and this is mainly to every white liberal that I've seen post this shit on Twitter, if you really care about me, you will offer me a solution. You will not offer me sympathy. The notion of just get a lawyer is an extremely privileged take. That I understand. But rather than continuously give people that kind of come from environments like I found myself in, or like I was raised around other people in, I'd rather look for a solution in this rather than keep emphasizing why these things keep happening. We have enough examples, we got enough research, there's enough information out there that things like this don't have to keep being a thing. I don't believe it's as black and white as Meg is saying it is, but I'm sure she probably used the attraction and the social media presence that she has in order to leverage her argument against her label, so that at this point maybe they'll look at that and maybe they'll be afraid of the criticism. Maybe other people will look at this and be like, oh shit, this will kind of make us unattractive to other artists if she's putting us out there in a negative light. Maybe we do need to renegotiate with her. This is how the rich stay rich and the poor barely make anything at the end of the day, all right? Because the people with the value have the value and they're giving their value away for some momentary money. I like Hove, I like Diddy, I like all these other black billionaires, but you don't become a billionaire by playing by the rules. You don't become a billionaire by doing everything that you're supposed to do. Mace will tell you that about Diddy himself. So while I do appreciate and I can understand what Meg is saying, I think it's a little irresponsible to put this information out there in a light that only makes you seem like the victim without emphasizing the other maneuvers and other ways that an artist can prevent this from happening to themselves, beyond just telling them get a lawyer that isn't the label's lawyer and have them look over the contract. You have avenues, you have ways, you utilize all your resources, man. And that's really all I got to say about the situation. People do not have your best interests at heart though, okay? This does not excuse the evil that is already within the music industry, and these are investors, not your friends. That's all I got to say. Bye.